Great. Well, welcome back to the Breaking Ice podcast. My name is Josh Ferguson. Today I have the lovely opportunity to sit down with Doris Howard. I don't know you very well, so this is going to be fun just to get to know you. And one of the things that I think kind of inspires me about doing stuff like this is just the opportunity to sit down with people I would never normally spend this kind of time talking to. Right. Not for any other reason than life is busy. Right?
Mm-hmm. That's for sure.
So we were just talking off camera for a second, but we figured we'd pick up here. What were we talking about?
Well, I asked you about how you started this, or how you got going here.
So I've been listening to podcasts for, ever since like 2008, maybe.
Right.
And I listened throughout like high school and grades, or middle school and whatnot, and mostly high school actually. Mm-hmm. And it was always just like, I loved the format. Like, it was radio, but I actually cared about it. And I was living in Mexico at the time, so it was like a way to connect with the States and Canada, which felt more like home. Like, I'm a Canadian. I lived in Mexico for 10 years. And I was surrounded with Americans when I was there, because it was an expat community. So I feel more like I'm from North America than I am from like Canada.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was a way to connect with kind of what was going on back home and in the States, which was really relevant to us at the time.
Right, for sure.
And I just continued to listen. Obviously, my tastes have evolved over time and whatnot. And then I've always was like, oh, man, it'd be really fun to do one myself. And I just never did until I did. Wow. And but it was one of those things where it was like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast. And it was like, I actually need a lot more. Like, I need chairs and mics and a computer. Like, it was more than I expected to get going. The details. There's so many little details to make it. But yeah, how you doing today?
Good. Yeah, on the way here, I was thinking, people, I tell my story. You mentioned my history, my past, my childhood, etc. And I think, absolutely everybody has a history and has a story.
Totally.
And so mine's not really, especially from the north. Mm-hmm. People my age, they have quite stories from the land and all that, and so they have a lot of stories. And so I kind of blend in more with the history from up here. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking, and then that's actually we got talking about it here. I was thinking, I wonder how Josh came up here. I wonder what his story is. So how did you get up here?
Okay, I'm going to answer. I'm just going to check the cameras 1 second.
Okay.
I usually like to flip these around so I can make sure.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, you can see if it's recording or not. Yeah, smart.
Well, Leanna and I were living in Ontario.
Okay.
During the pandemic. And before coming up here, I worked at a summer camp, and we would send kids on canoe trips for 19 days at a time. Similar to what Black Spruce does, just at a much larger scale. So we'd service like 500 kids a summer. We do about 50, 60 canoe trips a summer. Yeah. Big staff, 50 people, that kind of a thing.
What was the name of the?
Northwaters in Langskip. Oh, okay. And I attended that summer camp every summer from when I was 12 to 31. Wow. So it was like 18.
Oh, wow.
18 years, 18 summers going there. So it had a profound impact on my personality and the way I look at things, and it was my life. And it had always been a goal of mine to I was like, well, this is what I want to do. And I did that, and I studied outdoor recreation, parks and tourism to kind of get me there. Mm-hmm. But it didn't have without buying the camp, at least that's how I felt, it didn't really have the legs to support a family. Mm-hmm. And that was always far and above what I wanted to do more. It was have kids and raise kids. So it was clear that, and also 18 summers was a long time. It was time to do something else.
Yeah, you're kind of familiar with that. Okay, let's get on with something else.
Yeah, and kind of go into a growth zone and challenge myself. So I had the idea that I kind of wanted to do what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. video production and podcasts and whatnot. And I, have my parents are artists, so I have that background.
Okay.
And we also were like always loved the North from canoe tripping, and we had spent time up, not up here specifically, but in northern regions, and we're like, that would be kind of cool. And Mel and Esker lived here before us. They lived in Fort Good Hope, and we've been friends for a long time.
Right.
So they were up here, and we're like, you know what, we should go. And we were really sick of the COVID situation in Ontario. Like, it was particularly bad there, of pretty much like worst in the world or something like that, in terms of the lengths of lockdowns that we were doing and shutdowns and whatnot. So we just bailed. We're like, nah. So we were like, okay, let's apply for jobs. Whoever gets the job first will go. And she got the teaching job.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we came. And it couldn't have worked out better, because if I got a job, then like I'm more industrious than Leanna is.
Right.
Just in terms of being self-directed. So like she's much more comfortable being employed. And so this has worked out beautifully.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't come along with its trials and tribulations. Like, as everyone knows, living here is a roller coaster.
Yes, right. Yeah, we can go into a lot of details there.
Like, things that I couldn't even like, obviously we came up here in 2021 without any context, right? So like, I didn't know all the stuff that had happened, and like, how could I, right? It just was like, and there's no qualms there, but I've intimately come to know, we own a house here, and we're raising kids here, and I run a business here. So like, and I spend time on the land, right? So there's like, in all these dimensions, it's kind of harder. It's hard to not get to know the place really well.
Yeah, right.
Intimately in that way. But yeah.
Well, that's very similar to me.
Okay.
When I came up here in 2010, the only person I knew was my mom.
Where are you from?
Well, I'll go back.
Yeah, go way back.
Lead up to there. My dad, excuse me, he was Gwich'in.
Okay.
That's the most northern Indian tribe. We'll say Indian because that's what they call it.
Sure.
Back then. Indian tribe in North America.
Sure.
And he was a very colorful person. He was actually, he was born in Rampart House, which used to be the United States. Then when they redrew the borders, it became part of Canada.
Okay.
So.
And where?
In Alaska.
Okay, in Alaska. Gotcha. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Little detail. So anyway, so his family, his dad was Jack Raymond.
Okay.
And they were they actually lived in the Yukon. And oh my goodness, the history there.
Oh my God.
And the stories just are abound. But my dad, anyway, they came over the mountains, traveled by dog sled.
Over this way?
Yep, this way.
Whoa.
And went, first of all, to Fort McPherson. And then they were kind of, Jack Raymond, he was actually Scottish. He married my grandmother, who was Gwich'in.
Oh, okay. So
that's the connection there. So they came over the mountains, and my dad was 9 years old.
When he came over the mountains?
Yeah, by foot. So that's a story in itself.
What a journey.
Yeah, and but back then it wasn't a common, but it did happen, and there was a trail. To cross the mountains like that? Yeah, there was a trail. It was
It was, how do I say this? It was more commonplace.
Yeah,
and it was less of a, wow, what an adventure. It was just like, well, we got to do it if we want to go over there.
Right, exactly. But it still was quite a feat.
No kidding.
And he just remembers 9 years old, and he doesn't have a lot of memories, but he remembers walking and walking and walking.
In the winter, right? Because through dog sled.
They'd have to, yeah.
What time of year, do you know?
Actually, I don't know, but I assumed it was winter.
Okay.
Because it would be pretty hard to...
Yeah.
But so the survival skills were... Grandpa had the best survival skills. And my dad grew up with that. And that's how that's where he worked mostly, is teaching survival. He was, my mom and dad, well, first of all, I'll just say, when I think they were in Toledo. Yeah, they were in Toledo. And the two families got to know each other. And in those days, it was arranged marriages. Okay. So my mom's parents gave her a choice of two men, Isidore Yukon or John Raymond. And John Raymond was 32 years old. She was 16. I don't know how old Isidore Yukon, but anyway, she chose John Raymond.
Okay.
So that's how. If she would have chose Isidore Yukon, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to
Totally, yeah.
And neither would any of the Yukons.
And yeah, I was going to say the Yukons, I've met some of them around here.
Right.
Yeah, in Delaney, right?
Right, yeah, in Delaney. And so anyway, so that's how they got together. And they got married, and one of the places that they
what's the time frame we're looking at here?
We're looking at my mom was born in 1927, and she was 16 years old. So if we did the math, she was
37, 45, just
right.
after the war?
Before
the war.
Before the war.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was 16. Anyway, I don't know exactly what year they got. I think it was 1943.
Yeah.
They got married.
Oh, yeah,
42 maybe. Yeah. But anyway, the war was still on.
Yeah.
And so they worked in Camp Cannell.
Okay.
And while they were there, my oldest brother was born. He was born in Camp Cannell. An American doctor delivered him.
Okay.
My second brother was born. His name is Bill. And he was born in the little shack or whatever they lived in. My grandmother delivered him.
Yeah, you didn't fly to Yellowknife for...
No, not back then. And I was the first one born in the hospital.
Okay.
And then my sister was born in Schooner Channel in the Delta.
Okay.
Near Klavic. And then they moved around all over the place.
No kidding.
Then they were in Sawmill Bay in Delaney. My mom was pregnant with me. Then I was flown to Edmonton. She was flown to Edmonton. So I was the first one born in the hospital.
So did you grow up in Delaney?
Nope.
No.
They came back to Delaney. And then when I was a baby, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3, Mom and Dad went to Alberta.
Okay.
And that's where I remained. We ended up remaining there. That's where my mom and dad split up.
And what's the age spread between you and your siblings?
Okay, 5 years between me and my sister, and then they're 1 year apart.
Okay. All right. And you're the youngest?
Or was the 4.
Okay.
Of us 4. Then there's more children.
Sure.
Yeah. I was actually end up being the middle. But anyway, so they moved to Alberta, and my dad was probably going to teach survival there, I think. Anyway, he had a friend, Russell Chase, and my mom and Russell became very close. My dad they ended up being together, and my dad came back north.
Okay.
So my dad came back north when I was maybe 2 or 3. So I never really remember him very much. But Russell Chase ended up being my dad.
Okay.
And
was he a good father?
He was.
Yeah.
Especially in the early years. I just remember, it's amazing how children have flashbacks.
Yeah.
Just vivid, you can't remember the whole scene. But I remember he had this white Jeep. And I remember he was extremely gifted. He could do anything. When he was 12 years old, he used to go trapping with his dad and everything in Alberta. He was with his dad, and his dad's horse and the pack horse and everything slid into the river, and they died. And so my dad was 12 years old. He ended up having to take care of the family at that point.
No kidding.
Yeah. So 12 years old, he became the man. He had 2 younger brothers. But he grew up so gifted. He could do whatever he had to do, he could do.
He had to.
With his hands.
Yeah.
You know. So he was just a very amazing man. But anyway, he had this Jeep. My mom, I remember standing beside him as he was driving this white Jeep. And my mom's there. And I must have called him Russell. And he says, nope, just call me Daddy. And he was my daddy from there, you know. But what was really interesting, and then shortly after that, we stayed near Hinton for a while. And then he took us out, and this is the most amazing childhood anybody could have. He took us out to, it was an old coal mining town. It was a ghost town.
Okay.
Stircoal, it was called. It was vacant. We were the
not a
only
soul.
family there. And wild horses.
Okay.
Wild horses roamed. So there was the mines, there was a post office, there was houses, all vacant. It was the most amazing playground you can imagine.
That's cool.
It was really
So did you visit there once, or did you visit
No,
there
we
multiple?
lived there.
Oh, you lived there?
Yeah, we lived there
Okay.
until I was maybe. That's where I have most of my memories. Is in
Oh, so why?
three to four.
What was the rationale for living in a ghost town?
Well, he had. I think he had a job nearby.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly what he did because as a child I
Sure.
don't remember those details. So anyway, so we lived there for a while. Then we moved.
So you just
To Hinton.
explored.
Yeah.
Explored the ghost town.
Oh, I could tell you all kinds of stories, but I won't get sidetracked
Sure.
with all those details. And but anyway, we moved then to Hinton,
And how old are you at this point?
and I must have been about 5,
Okay.
4 or 5 years old because I started school. Sure, I was in Hinton at that time. They just had a one-room schoolhouse. Well, actually, it was 2 rooms because it was grade 5. There was 2 houses. There was 1 to 5 in one, and then 5 to I don't know what. And my
Sure.
older brothers and sisters went there, and I started in this one-room schoolhouse. Shortly after that, the other school was. But anyway, we lived near Hinton, not right in Hinton. And we literally, you hear these people telling stories. Oh, when I was a kid, I had to walk 2 miles to school. I literally did have to walk 2 miles to school.
Everyone's just exaggerating.
It wasn't It wasn't uphill both ways.
Yeah. But it was winter a lot of the time.
It was, and we had to go through forests, and we had to, So anyway, but when I was 9, then Russell, and then there was 4 other children, 3 other children born after me.
you. Yeah.
Okay. And then when I was 9, my mom left all of us with Russell, and she came back to Norman Wells. And so.
Why did she leave?
Oh, they were drinking. It was
Okay.
real messy.
Sure.
It was really bad.
Yeah.
Russell did really good until he started drinking. And I don't think for the first few years, I don't think he drank at all. And I don't think Mom drank. But once they started drinking, it was just downhill.
Yeah.
It was gone. I don't even remember hardly ever seeing my mom because she was, and it was a very miserable childhood, actually.
Sure.
It
Well, things can turn quick.
can, and it did.
I think that nowadays people don't have an appreciation for how fragile
You're so right.
positive life experiences can be.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And but I never blamed her because I always felt that she was needy. She had issues that she couldn't deal with, and so I never ever had any bitterness towards her for leaving us. But what was really interesting is after she left, now my dad, or I called him Dad, he's
Yep,
Russell. He had 7 children by himself to raise.
And the youngest is what, like an infant?
Oh, infant.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still in diapers.
Wow.
And my sister, though, she was 15, so she was
Helpful.
able to take
Yeah.
over the family.
Sure.
But but I remembered we didn't have there was no electricity or running water or anything like that. There's a lot of skill in cleaning diapers.
Totally.
When you don't have, you have to let them dry. Go into this because it's kind of funny. You have to let the poop dry, and then you scrape it off with a knife.
Yeah.
And then you soak them in water, and then you wash them.
That makes sense.
And she was 15, and she had to totally take care of this baby.
There was no internet to look up how to do it.
No Google. No, she was taught. She saw my mom doing it
Sure.
before she left, and so. But anyway,
But
so
still, that's another example of young people stepping up when necessary.
when necessary.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think, just a side point, I think that is one of the problems. Young people aren't challenged.
Oh
to
yeah,
step
no.
up to the life is so easy.
Well, young people aren't challenged, and what it happens is it breeds laziness. But not just that is. I always say that I'd rather make my kids competent than safe.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if they're competent, then they can decide to take on challenges, and if challenges come their way, they'll be able to overcome them. But if they're only safe,
And they're so sheltered.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sheltered. And so the first year he left me and my younger brother with the family, and he took the rest of them out into the bush. And what he did is he cut pulpwood for a living.
oh, for the mill?
No,
No,
he did it all for himself. Well, actually, that first year, I don't think it was pulpwood. It was something else he was doing, maybe fence posts or something. I don't know what
Sure.
exactly, because I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But the second year, then we were joined him. I had just finished grade 4, went into the bush, started grade 5. Fart started grade 5 correspondence lessons, and he cut pulpwood for a living. So we often lived in total isolation. He would just find these camps. He'd have if there was a road there, he'd cut pulpwood, and my 2 older brothers would help him, and the 3 of them. And then they would load up the truck with this pulpwood, take it to town, sell it, and then come back for another load. And that's how he made a living.
And he's not drinking at this point?
Not when he's out in the bush.
Not when he's out in the bush.
Right. When he would go into town and he'd get the money, he was supposed to come back with all his groceries and everything.
Sure.
Then he would start drinking. And he'd say, I'm going to be gone for 2 days. A week later, we're still out in the bush
and
waiting
it's just
for
the 7
him
kids.
to return. Well, at that point, he would usually take some of the older ones with him. So
just the younger kids.
Often just us younger kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there was enough food in the house?
Often we ran out of food. So not often. We did occasionally run out of food.
Yeah.
And one of the times we ran out of food, was interesting. We lived, we had rifles, and we lived off the land, basically.
See, we were just talking about how life's not hard enough now, but it's not that we want that to be the case.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you don't want to be quite that far down, right? So anyway, Russell went to town, and by then I was the oldest.
Yeah.
My sister left when she was 18. I was 12. That's when I took over the family, when I was 12. But just my younger brothers and sisters. And so anyway, it's one point he left us. But we weren't in our normal shack that we lived in. It was quite a distance away. Mm-hmm. And in this one, it wasn't really a home. It was just, I don't know, for some reason, we stayed
a shelter.
there. Yeah. And we didn't have a rifle or anything like that.
Yeah.
We ran out of food. He was supposed to be back. He didn't come back. We ran out of food, and literally all we had was me and my 3 younger brothers, my 2 younger brothers and sister.
So
I didn't know what to do.
No kidding. Okay, wait, pause for 1 second.
Yep.
Just another thought that goes through my head is like the older kids, like he was raising 7 kids.
Right.
Half of which were his.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
And at this point,
Right.
most of the kids he's left behind are his own children.
That's right.
Right. And then
and then they all left, and then he just had the younger ones.
And yourself.
And myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I was 12 years old. And
you're in the shelter and you ran out of food.
We ran out of food.
And your youngest sibling is how old?
Oh, by then I think he was just starting kindergarten, so he's about 5. He was supposed to start kindergarten.
Sure.
But he didn't, of course.
So a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 12-year-old.
Right, basically. And so my brother and I said, well, we got to get some food somehow. So he had a slingshot.
You have no car.
Oh, we're out in the bush.
You're just in the bush alone.
Totally.
There's no way to get home. There's no way to contact anybody.
No. I'm so thankful in all these years, none of us ever got hurt or really sick.
Yeah, no kidding.
But anyway, so, okay, we're going to have to, so he had a slingshot.
Okay. This is some real Hardy Boys. Like,
yeah, no. But
we have the dangerous book for boys.
He was still quite young, and he wasn't really good with it. So we went walking, hunting. Okay, what are we going to shoot? What are we going to kill? We saw a woodpecker. He killed it with the slingshot. We were so
First shot?
shocked. I don't know if it was the first. I think it's all. But anyway,
beginner's luck or desperate times? Which
desperate
one?
Times, I think, a bit both. And so we brought that home, and it basically woodpecker is not. Well, it was a fairly good sized woodpecker, but still not a lot of meat. But it flavored our rice.
Oh yeah.
Here's the amazing
How does
thing.
red woodpecker taste?
I don't remember. It tasted great, I'm sure. Well, we lived on wild meat, so it probably. And then the next morning we woke up and we had this little shack, and it was in a clearing. Usually we're right in the bush, but this has a little clearing. Oh, just not very big, maybe 2 or 3 lots, houses, lots. We woke up, and in the backyard, was a huge flock of yellow birds. It was a huge flock.
How many? Like no,
Lots.
how many?
I mean,
but
they
like,
just-
how big are they? How big are they?
Well, they're just small. I think they were American finches.
They're
so it gives you an idea how small
slingshot size.
They're slingshot size and rock size. So he grabs a slingshot. I grab some rocks. Now, usually when there's a big flock of birds like that, you throw one rock, they're all gone.
Did they just stick around?
They sat there, and we killed, I don't know how many we killed.
Like 30?
Oh, no. Now, here's the difference. My brother tells the story. He says we had this big pot of birds. I tell the story. We had
Like
just
6?
enough, maybe 2 each for each of us.
That feels like divine intervention in some
It
way.
was.
Yeah.
I really believe it was.
Yeah.
And now, at the time, I didn't think that though. But as I grew older and I started
it's like
understanding things.
there's 4 kids starving in the woods, and a flock of birds lands, and they don't move when you throw rocks at them.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Totally
Totally normal behavior.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, so anyway, we went from bush camp to bush camp to bush camp.
Just the 4 of you, or did your dad come back?
No, when I say we, now I'm including my dad.
Okay,
Sorry. Thanks for the clarification.
Did he come back? Open the door. There's like 5 birds. What are you doing?
Now, the thing is, I recalled back in my memory, I think, well, we didn't kill anything after that. He must have come back within the next day or something.
This is so foreign to me. Like, there's parts of the story that aren't foreign to me, but just, I'm a father.
Right.
I can't imagine.
Right.
I can't imagine. But I can kind of imagine coming back and being like, wow, good job.
Well, I don't know if he really, I think there was only one time that he suffered the consequences of us leaving us alone. And that is this one camp, he had a workhorse. Mm-hmm. And he needed the workhorse because the logs were bigger and he needed to haul them and everything. He went. And so it was me and my younger siblings that were home. My older ones, I think they went to town with him and just left us younger ones alone. Because he always thought, I'll only be gone a couple days. You'll be fine.
Totally.
But he would start drinking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the first day or so, neither of us really knew how to take care of a horse. We took the horse to water. We sort of gave it some food, but then we started running out of food for the horse. And so then we would take the horse and lead him around. We couldn't let him go because we didn't want him to disappear, and let him start eating food.
Like grass and stuff.
Grass and whatever he could find.
Sure.
And there was this one weed, at the time I was totally ignorant of what kind of weed it is, but since then it's called local weed.
Okay.
Horses are not supposed to eat it.
Yeah.
If they do, they'll die.
Okay.
They could die.
Yeah.
But he started eating it. It was like he became addicted to it. He would just find he would just be eating all the local.
Did you have like a sinking feeling? You're
No. I
Okay.
thought it was good. I thought, I had no idea.
Sure.
Absolutely none. And one day I went out into the barn and he was dead. He was laying on, I think it was a mare. She was laying on her side dead. And a few days later, Dad came back. His horse was dead. That was his means of livelihood, basically.
Yeah.
And
wow. Those are called natural consequences.
Right. I always thought, and I was afraid of him coming back. I thought he'd be angry with us.
Sure.
But he didn't. He took full responsibility for it himself.
Good.
He knew he shouldn't have left us that long, and it was not our responsibility to take care of a horse.
Yeah.
But I just remember
it's barely your responsibility to take care of yourself at that point.
Right. He was very quiet when I said the horse died, and he went and looked. He didn't talk. He was just, I think he was devastated.
Yeah, I think the gravity of his actions really landed on him at that moment.
That's possible.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyway, while I was out in the bush, one time we went to town, and when I was 12, 13, 14, my sister, when she took care of everybody, she was more competent. She kept the house tidy. She loved cooking.
You were like 8 when she was 15 or something like that? Yeah.
Right. And so, it's because there's 5 years difference between us. But when I took over, I was only 12. I knew how to bake bread. I knew how to make bannock. I knew how to basically cook. Well, our cooking was really simple. You cut up wild meat, throw it in a pot, you boil it.
Yeah.
Cook some potatoes. You have boiled meat and potatoes. That's basically what you live.
No salt?
Oh, yeah, salt, I'm sure. And once in a while, we'd make some baked beans.
Ooh, baked beans are good.
Yeah, and a cook stove, yeah. And our bread was amazing. And so, so it was, cooking wasn't the problem for me, but
It was
it was
all the auxiliary things?
managing
Yeah.
the house. It
Yeah.
was keeping it clean, organizing, and whatever.
And all those details really make a big difference in terms of survival.
Does.
You know?
Even in your own well-being, how
Sure.
you view yourself. You've got a dirty, cluttered house. It's just, no. But Russell was really good. He never ever, I think he always, maybe he felt sorry for me. Maybe he knew it was too much. I don't remember.
He didn't like
never
take it
did.
out on you or
No,
whatnot.
I
Yeah.
never. So he kept us out of foster homes, but he didn't provide for us.
Yeah.
We very seldom, like I remember going to town bare feet and sitting in the truck, or my brother going into the shoe store and bringing me shoes to try on so that I could get out of the truck and walk around. I didn't have to walk around Edson with bare feet. So he didn't really provide for us. But you know what? I think I would have preferred that than all of us being split up and going into foster
Yeah,
homes.
no, I can imagine that.
Because I don't have horrible memories. He didn't abuse us. We were neglected, but we weren't abused.
Well, he seems like a deeply flawed man with a good heart.
Yeah, he
Or
was
something like
well,
that.
he had a sense of responsibility. He was
Sure.
going to take care of these children, and he did it.
Yeah.
And I know how to do it. I don't know.
Was
I
he
mean,
educated?
I think he only had grade 4 or 5, something
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
But he was amazingly gifted. I mean, my brother, before we started going out into the bush and all that, my mom was still there. He took my brother once hunting wild horses.
Okay.
My brother's story is amazing. He told how Russell would get a horse, and the horse and he'd have a lasso, and he could flick it, and he'd catch the front leg of the horse, and the horse would tumble, and then he'd just get the horse, right? Because
What, with a knife or what?
no, he would. I don't know. He would.
Would he kill the horse or would he
he would
capture the
take
horse?
it and
Okay.
he would sell it to rodeos.
Oh,
That's
okay,
how he
okay,
did
okay.
it. Yeah. I'm so
You said
glad-
hunting. I was like,
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
capturing.
I heard capturing wild horses. That is so
Then
good.
he would get it. I was like, whoa.
So anyway, he was just very gifted.
Sure.
He could. My brother's stories were pretty amazing. I think that was one of the real good memories that he
Sure.
has in his growing up. And so, but anyway, we stayed in the bush till I was from 10 years old, till 17.
Mm-hmm.
So we had all those adventures. Before we moved back into town, I think I was about 14 years old. We did go into town once, and what he did is he rented a little house really close to town for us to live in. We were still planning to go back into the bush, but he brought us all with him this time.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to provide accommodations for us. So we weren't left alone in the bush this time. We came into town with him, and we're in this little house, but it was still a ways from town, and we had one bag of potatoes. I don't think we had any meat. Again, he was planning to come back, and
Sure.
We ran out of food. My dog, I had a little Sheltie collie dog. She had pups. She had we couldn't keep them. And so we couldn't keep all the dogs she had. I mean, we couldn't afford to feed ourselves, basically.
Sure, yeah.
And so what we did is we put them all in a gunny sack. You put lots of rocks with it, and then you immerse them into a pail of water.
The dogs.
The dogs, the pups,
Yeah.
as soon as they're born.
Sure,
as soon
sure.
as they're all born.
Yeah.
That was very depressing for me.
That's hardcore.
And then
But not having the necessarily the means
No,
to
it wasn't
feed.
necessary.
Yeah, you couldn't
some things are necessary
Yeah.
that you wouldn't do if you had opportunity not to do it. And plus, we had this bag of potatoes. We didn't have any food. And my brothers and sisters, they weren't being cared for.
And you're 15, 16?
I think I'm 14.
14?
Yeah. And I just went into, first time I can remember really going into a depression. And not only that, I could see in my own heart, I just knew I was failing.
Was it Was being in town harder?
I think maybe it was. I don't know what the difference made
Well,
this time, but I was really, really.
there's something
down.
about like being in the bush where you're like, what choice do I have?
Or you're
But
survived.
if you're around people,
That could be, yeah.
I don't know. Like, not. I think that if you're around people, it's possible that you could get help, but also you have the contrast of seeing how other people are doing.
That could be part of it. Well, though we were still isolated.
Sure.
We were distance from town. It was on a farm.
I feel like depression at a moment like that is unfortunate. It's not what you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I honestly, I laid down on my bed and I didn't get up.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what to do. It was just, there
You're
was
14.
no future.
Yeah.
There was no, our whole life was just dark.
Minute to minute. Yeah.
And I don't know how somebody at some point along the way gave me a little book. It's called Daily Bread.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sitting beside my bed. And so I just picked it up and started reading. And that's when I was first introduced to Jesus. And the book talked about Jesus.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say you didn't grow up with faith before that.
No,
Okay.
no. And I had no concept of what the Bible said about him or anything, but I just cried out. I said, Jesus, help me. Up to that point, I honestly do not remember anybody telling me they loved me. I don't remember a hug. That changed in that moment. It was like he walked into the room. That's the only way I can describe it. It was like my room was so full of love. I couldn't honestly contain it. I laid there on the bed just weeping and weeping and weeping. It was like love was just washing over me. And finally it subsided. And I said, I'm going to follow Jesus. My life is going to be his. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything about him hardly though. But I knew he loved me. I knew he loved me.
Yeah.
And he was interested in me. And he was going to help me. That's all I knew.
Thank God that book was there, right?
Yeah, really. Providentially, somebody gave me that book.
Sure.
And so anyway, my brother and I, my younger brother, David, him and I were not always on the same page. We kind of fought each other and we teased each other. And I thought, oh boy, if I tell him this, he's going to make fun of me. But I had to tell somebody. So I called him in and he walked into the room. And I said, David, I'm going to follow Jesus. I'm a Christian. And I expected him to make fun of me, but he stood there terrified. He was literally stood there speechless. He couldn't talk. And we never discussed it after that. Years later, my life did change.
Yeah.
I really did. I wasn't depressed anymore. I had hope. I guess that's what I had. I had hope.
Yeah.
But before I didn't have any hope.
Yeah.
And so years later, he told me, he says, Doris, and I talked to him. I said, do you remember that walking into my room there? And he says, yes, Doris. He says, I was absolutely terrified. He said, you were glowing. He says, it was like a light around you. He says, I didn't understand it. He says, but I know it was real and it terrified me. And so that's why he never made fun of me. Because he knew it was real.
Yeah.
And I don't know what
Well, probably your resolve in that moment was striking.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
probably my face was happy and glowing and, you know.
And it was a dark time.
Dark before, and here's the contrast. I don't know exactly. But anyway, so he never ever did mock it, and he hasn't since that experience.
Did he have faith as well, or no?
No.
And how about your younger siblings? How did your life change?
So we went back to the bush after that.
Okay.
So here's one of the things that changed was it was like somebody instructing me. I'd wake up in the morning, and this didn't last for very long, unfortunately, because I'm not very disciplined. But I'd wake up in the morning. It was like an inner prodding to say, okay, just get up, make breakfast. Breakfast. Okay, now do the dishes. Mm-hmm. It's very extremely simple.
Certainly.
But I didn't get distracted, go off and play and, go off and do something I enjoyed rather than do the dishes.
Sure, yeah.
So I became a little bit more responsible. But that didn't last for very long because but it was, I could tell.
Well,
I was on a path.
if you don't have positive reinforcement for those kinds of things, that it's really hard to maintain resolve alone.
Right, alone.
Yeah.
So we were getting close to, we were going to move into town by then. I was about 3 years later, 17, almost 17. I was 16, but almost 17 because my birthday was in July. So we moved into town. But before we moved into town, there was 2 things that I wanted to do when we go to town. Find a church, find out about Jesus. Secondly, I'd never finished my grade 5 correspondence lessons. Nobody made me do course lessons.
Sure.
None of us did any schooling.
Well, yeah.
And so I had maybe I really only had grade 4. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get my education. And so we moved into town. That was my goal. First minister I ran into, he was visiting. Then we lived in a little tiny community.
Well, prior to this, you didn't particularly have community.
No. Well, there were times once in a while we would live, and it would be a few other people in that camp or close to it.
Sure.
But often we were isolated.
Yeah, but you didn't have a community like
No.
a church would be a community.
Oh, no, we didn't.
Yeah.
No. And so the first minister I ran into, he was visiting the neighbors. And oh, you're a minister? Can I come to your church? He said, sure. So he started picking me up every Sunday. He was a Mennonite.
Okay.
Really nice people. Really nice people.
Totally.
They were a community, yeah. And, I'm so thankful. I mean, anyway.
So before we go on, this seems like a turning point, but what did the first, what were the lessons that you derived from the first 17 years of your life? How did that, what was your takeaway? Like how did that shape you?
You know what? I wasn't very philosophical and thought about deep things.
Yeah, but you've had time to look back.
Yeah. And so at the time, it was just survival. It was just one day after another after another.
Certainly.
So what I think maybe one of my takeaways is after coming is that for myself personally, if God hadn't have intervened in my life, if he hadn't have intervened in my life would be 100% different.
Mm. And
I would have followed the path of my mother.
I was going to say,
probably would have followed the path of what all I knew would be. I probably would have started drinking.
Yeah.
I probably would have went down that road. I'm sure I would have.
Yeah, your life would have been different, and you're claiming that it would have been worse.
Oh, yeah. Much worse, darker.
Yeah.
I would never have gotten out of that depression that I was in. That, he rescued me, totally rescued me from a certain destructive path.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I went to the Mennonite church for I don't know how many years. I learned how to be a good Mennonite, but I still didn't really learn about Jesus very much. It wasn't until I was going to Edmonton to finish my grade 12 because I wanted to go into nursing.
Yeah. Now you have a path and a goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was funny. What I wanted to do was be a missionary.
Okay.
So when it was adult education, so I was going to be sponsored. And said, okay, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a missionary. He said, oh, we can't sponsor you to be a missionary. You have to have a skill of some kind, like be a nurse. Or I said, okay, then I'll be a nurse. So anyways, that was my goal, was to become a nurse. And so I went to Edmonton to finish my grade 12 so that I could enter nursing school. And during that summer, well, it was actually going to NAIT or Alberta College. I can't remember which one it was at that point. Anyway, I didn't really know much about Jesus. I didn't really understand the Bible. But I was always telling everybody how good Jesus was and everything. And there was this man. How are we doing for time?
Oh, no, we're good.
Okay. So there was this man. He was a draft dodger from the United States.
Okay. He
was a scary guy. Mm-hmm. Really was. But I didn't know that then. I was extremely naive. I didn't know anything.
Sure.
And so anyway, he
You
kind
knew
of
that you
took an
wanted to be a
interest
nurse,
yeah, I didn't know that.
and you knew that Jesus saved you.
Good point. So he came. So this guy, he was really messed up, really, and he would come and sit with me and talk with me, and I'd tell him about a little bit I knew about Jesus. Well, one day he walked into the cafeteria, and as he walked in across the room, I could see something's different about him. He was just different. He walked over and he was so enthusiastic. He said, "Doris, you won't believe what happened to me last night." I said, "No." And he said, "I got saved." I said, "What?" And he says, "Yeah, I went to a Jesus People meeting."
Jesus people.
Yeah, it was. You heard about the Jewish people?
No, I just.
Yeah, okay. That's what they were called.
Okay.
They were kids off the street, off of drugs, and they
Off of drugs.
yeah, they came off of drugs. Because what happened is they were on drugs, on the street, hippies, long hair.
Okay.
It was during that time,
Yeah.
in their 70s, 60s, late 60s, 70s. And so the media called them the Jesus People.
Oh, okay.
They
I
didn't
thought
have
this
a
was.
church.
I thought this was just his.
No, it was his description. And I'd heard about them.
Okay.
I had seen an interview on TV of these two Jesus people being interviewed, and I was I'd love to go there. I'd love to meet them, but I didn't know. I didn't even know my way around Edmonton. And so he said, "I'll take you there, Doris." So that's how I actually heard the gospel for the first time.
Okay.
I heard the term. I always said, "I'm saved," but if somebody would have really questioned me, "What do you mean you're saved?" I wouldn't have been able to answer them.
Sure.
And so I heard for the first time how Jesus was born. He was God. He became a man. He lived a sinless life. And he came for one reason, that was to die on the cross. And I heard how when he was on the cross, my sin came upon him. And he was the sacrifice for my sin to restore us back to a holy God. When that hit me, I just started weeping and weeping and weeping. And it's still, when I think about it, it still makes me want to weep because I didn't understand. Now I understood. And it was like now the doors were totally flung open. Before I was following Jesus, but was still in a fog. Now it was clear. Now I understood what he did on the cross. And when he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Excuse me. Those words were so extremely significant because he was forsaken by God. And says, so how was he forsaken by God? Well, the reason he was forsaken by God is in 2 Corinthians 5:21. It says, "He who knew no sin became sin that we might have become the righteousness of God." So our sin came upon him. He became the sin sacrifice to deliver us from our sin and restore us back to his Father. And that hit me. I went home. I was living with my sister, and I walked in, and I said, "Anne," that's my sister's. She was my older sister.
Okay.
And I said, I know now how, I understand now how Jesus saved me. I said, he bore our sin. I was like bubbling over trying to tell her. She just looked at me. She said, "Doris," she said, "you've gone to church all these years and you didn't know that?" I said, "No, I didn't." She said, "Even I knew that." And I thought, how could you know that and not want to just follow him? How would you know that? Why would you?
Do any of your other siblings have a faith like yours? Or?
No.
This is unique.
Yeah.
In your family.
Right. And just because I say that I became a Christian, I wasn't a perfect person. I'm still.
No, nobody is.
Exactly. Yeah. I still to this day am repenting constantly for my failings.
Totally.
And so I really think that a lot of times people see your failings, and that can cut short your message. And so anyway, but going back to the Jesus People. So I went to the Jesus People, and one of the leaders, his name was Les Howard, often took over the meetings. He was kind of a leader. We met in July. We got married in September.
Okay.
Now he's changed his name to Joseph.
Okay.
So that's who my husband is still.
Okay.
So together, we've been on this journey for a long time together.
Yeah.
Ups and downs, a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And then in 2010, we had 4 children. And we actually homeschooled them most of the time. They finished university. They all got jobs in the States. And like pretty good jobs.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like from throwing rocks at Tweety birds to 4 children having jobs in the States is...
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's miraculous. It's awesome.
Yeah, that is. Okay, thank the Lord for that. They were precious children.
Yeah.
Very grown up, very responsible.
Did you like being a parent?
Yes, but you know what? I was not. I had no mentoring. I failed miserably. Really not saying that to not, just as a fact.
This isn't a...
I didn't...
Yeah. This isn't like I'm human, so I failed miserably.
No,
but
I didn't know what I was doing, and I failed.
Well, your training was... You didn't have a role model when you were young. You were winging it as a 12-year-old.
Right.
Being a parent.
Right.
Right, yeah.
And so, and both Joseph and I, we failed. And our failures have resulted in a little bit of estrangement with some of our children.
Sure.
And so, but at the same time, I don't give up hope.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. There's two that are estranged from us. And during our years, because of our failures, I think there's bitterness there. And so I can
that you carry?
That they carry.
That they carry.
Towards us.
Sure.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
Because I can look back and I could say, okay, you're justified. And you know what I'm saying? And so I'm not, I'm grieved, and I really pray that one day the Lord will restore our relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I believe that.
Yeah.
I won't give up hope on that. Yeah, so in 2010, I think it was about 2000, we moved to the States because all our children were down there. And because I'm 50% Native American and Indigenous, there's an old treaty that says you can work in either United States or Canada.
Oh, okay.
And so on the basis of the Jade Treaty.
So Joseph is an American?
No.
Okay.
So we moved in 2000 to the States. And it was quite arduous to get all the paperwork and everything done.
It's not a simple thing.
No, it's not a simple thing. We got that done. We moved to the States. And so we were very close to our children down there. And but basically, because of lack of teaching, we kind of got involved more with a cult for a while.
Okay.
And that's how we really lost our children. Okay. And so it was during that time, 2 children came out of it, 2 are still in it.
In the cult?
In the cult, yeah.
Okay.
So.
And is it the 2 that came out of it who are estranged, or the 2 who are?
No, in it.
In it, okay.
Yeah, no, the 2 that came out.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no problem there. But the 2 that are in it, and you know what? We raised them in it. They don't know anything better.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
And plus, we do have failings. So it's a combination of them looking at legitimate failings and using them against us, and then the teaching of the cult.
If you could summarize the cult. What?
The cult is extreme authoritism.
Okay. Authoritarian?
Authoritarian, and you submit everything.
Okay.
And so they live in this
ideology.
You have to submit everything. You have to. And
was it under the guise of Christianity?
Under the guise of Christianity. And that's what made it real, because they use the Bible, right?
Sure.
Right. And so, you take the Bible and you misuse it, it's life or it's extreme death.
Yeah. Well, and
extreme darkness.
that's the same as humans.
Yep.
Right. the line between good and evil runs between every human's heart, right? So
Yeah.
runs down every human's heart. What was the moment when you realized that you were in a cult and needed to get out of the cult?
Well, it took me a while because I really loved my children, right?
Of course.
And I was kind of kicked out
Okay.
because I was having struggles.
With your faith in the cult.
Right.
Yeah.
And just not putting things together. When I would be by myself and I'd pray, I would be praying and I'd listen to myself praying that, whoa, something's wrong here because everything's not lining up here. I would
2 + 2 is 5.
right, and so I just had struggles.
Yeah.
But at the same time, desperately wanting to please them, really desperately. I mean, that's my life. Wanting to say yes, and actually, it was really difficult to put the two and two. I think I was kicked out, and I was actually by myself for a while. My children wouldn't even talk to me. Joseph was in Canada at that point. This is in Virginia. And how I knew it was, I was right. I had this little plaque that my daughter had given me. I can't remember if it was embroidery or what, but it was just a little thing that and I looked up at that, and I should have been really bitter because of the rejection and everything. I looked at it, and all I could feel was love for her. And I knew that it wasn't just my mother's love. There was a love that I had that nothing could destroy, and it was because of the love of God. And I still loved the cult members. At that point, I wasn't considering them a cult, but I knew I loved them, and I knew I had no bitterness in my heart or anything. And then shortly after that, Joseph came back from Canada, and he says, Doris, when they kicked you out, he says, I knew everything. They were wrong, absolutely wrong. They had no right to kick you out. And so then that's where then the pieces just started fitting together. And
things started to make more sense.
Oh, yeah.
Then you weren't living in lies.
Yeah, then we went back to the scriptures, and I realized if you stray from the scriptures, I mean the whole scriptures, not cherry picking like they did.
No, certainly.
You know what I mean? But
yeah.
the whole scriptures, because it all balances together. The Word of God is really the Bible is an amazing book.
Oh, it's a foundational text.
Yeah, and from beginning to end, people criticize it, but you think about it. You just think
people
about
criticize
the
it
Bible.
without ever having read it.
Yeah, exactly. Or they hear they just repeat things that they
parrot
said.
criticisms.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, it's 66 people wrote the Bible over a period of about 6,000 years. Most of them didn't know each other. In fact, very few knew each other except in the New Testament. And everything fits together. There are prophecies about Jesus in the Old Testament 600 years before Jesus was born. Specific, detailed prophecies of describing his death on the cross. Describing David in the Psalms, they've pierced my hands and my feet. They've plucked out my beard. They're casting lots for my garments. They didn't even know about crucifixion back then. And so you take all the evidence of the validity of the scriptures and the truthfulness of it, and you put it together, and all you can do is stand back and say, this has got to be a work of God. Men didn't conspire together. And
it's hard to conspire over 6,000 years.
Yes, exactly. And everything, it so perfectly fits together that it's just beyond our human understanding. So anyway, I treat it like it's absolute Word of God. And if I can't find it in there, if it doesn't line up, then I reject it. It's that simple.
Okay.
And the thing is, you can do that if you're willing to be wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I remember when the early days when I'd pick up the Bible, I would read it and I'd say, God, I lay aside my own thoughts. I really just want to know the truth. And because it's easy to pick up things with a preconceived idea or have an agenda, and you're trying to prove your agenda, right?
Yeah.
We do that. Everybody does that.
Every day.
Every day. The news, is full of agendas. Everybody has agendas.
The biggest agendas.
Right. And so you can't have your own personal agenda. You've
Yeah.
got to be humble and acknowledge that it is the Word of God.
Yeah, I think admitting you're wrong is a very difficult thing. It's such a good thing to practice
Yeah.
because you will be wrong.
Yeah.
There's no way you're
Right.
not going to be wrong
You're
at
going
some
to be
point.
corrected. And I've been corrected so many
Yeah.
times.
So this story starts up north, and you're back in Canada at this point, but you're not up north.
Right. So we're
Oh, he came down to the States.
we were living in Virginia.
Yeah.
My mother, who I really didn't see much
yes.
since I was 9 years old.
No, yeah.
Once in a while, I'd be in contact with her.
Like a letter?
A letter or no phone call.
A phone call?
She really couldn't write that well. A phone call, and I think she visited us once before we moved to Virginia when our children were small and we were living
In Edmonton? Yeah.
And so I see her just once in a while, maybe over the years, maybe half a dozen times. Anyway, but I was getting more and more in contact with her. Our children were all grown, they're all gone. Joseph and I are alone. And I contacted her, I was talking to her, and she was describing how sick she was in Norman Wells and how she doesn't have any help or anything. And I thought, you know what, she's getting near the end of her life. If I don't go out and visit her and get to know her now,
It's the only chance.
I don't have a chance. And I
Yeah.
might never have that chance. So in 2010, that's when I came up to
Okay.
see her, and came up for 2 weeks.
Uh-huh. Haven't left
You know what?
since.
There's a lot of stories.
I've heard that one before.
Yes, we've heard that one many times. But then I just couldn't leave her.
Yeah.
She needed help. She was really needing help. And so I called Joseph, and I mean, she was so sick, we really didn't think she was going to live much longer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called Joseph, and he said, you know what, people go in the army for a couple years, they're separated, we can do this. There's no problem. So I came up here, but she got healthy, and which was good.
yeah. It's good.
but now the distance relationship with Joseph and I are good.
Yeah.
And then while I was up here, again with my mom, I didn't really understand her that well, but I was so thankful for the opportunity to spend time. I remember our first Christmas. This is our first Christmas together, and her birthdays and things. It was just it was really good. And anyway, she got quite healthy. And
was that some kind of closure in some way, like from being a kid?
That could be. But and she was different than when I remembered.
Sure.
Now she wasn't drinking, and she was, she was a respected elder in the community, but at the same time, talk about my failings again. I didn't understand. I didn't really understand, and I started to. It became. She didn't understand me. I didn't really understand her, and she misunderstood me a lot. She didn't understand that what I was doing was for her good. We were just two different people, and
you had been separated for so long,
right.
Really different lives,
right?
Yeah,
and so such different, and so she, there became quite a rift there, and. For a while. Fortunately, it was at the beginning. It wasn't. It was just a short time, and then by the time she passed away in 2017, we had some really good times together.
So you got to spend 7 years together.
Yeah, it was really ups and downs again, but
That's remarkable. That's very cool.
I just really, I'm just so thankful for the opportunity that I had to get to know her. I would give anything to have her back again, and totally love her the way she deserved to be loved. I don't know. She was just very precious. She was a very precious person. I remember coming home from work. Sometimes she'd meet me at the door. I'd give her a hug, and she always had the best, most expensive perfumes. She smelled so good, and I would give her a hug, and I'd say, "Mom, you smell so good." Well, she wore that perfume every time I came home. But yeah, no, she was just, and she was a very well respected elder. I mean, her drinking days were over. She could tell stories like you wouldn't believe. vivid stories. I mean, I'm kind of writing down some of those stories. One time I got a recorder. I thought, I'm going to record these. So I was sitting on the couch and she's starting to tell her stories, and she looks and she says, "Is that a recorder?" It was just really small. I didn't think she would just turn it off. So I wish I could have recorded her stories. It was really sweet. No, I would give anything to give her a hug again.
And when did Joseph come out?
And then, well, there was another family, the Yukon family, Ashley Yukon. She got pregnant, and she had twins, and she had these twin babies, and the social services took them away from her. And if I had the opportunity, I would have been their foster mom. As soon as they were born, I took pictures of them, and Ashley was very special to me. And she would come over sometimes when she had struggles, and one night she even spent the night sleeping on my floor, and anyway, she got pregnant, but drinking was a problem in their family. And so when the twins were taken away from her, once in a while they would need a temporary foster home between families, but I could never take them to mom's because she was too old to have babies in the house. That
Sure,
would have
yeah.
been, it
would have been a big interruption.
I would not have even asked her.
Yeah.
And so she didn't even have to refuse. But they'd put me up in a hotel for a few days.
To take care of the kids.
To take care of the children. And one night, it was in the Heritage Hotel, they were crawling around on the floor, and I picked one of them up, and they were kind of getting tired, and I was holding the baby. And I just started praying for it, and I just started crying and crying. I said, God, you've got to intervene in their lives. Their path is not very positive. And I just really prayed that God would intervene in their life. I didn't know I was going to be the answer to that prayer. But anyways, so when they were about 3.5, social services called me to take care of them again. Again, I was in the Heritage Hotel.
Just 2015 or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
16.
2016.
Yeah. And so I had them, and the social worker told me they were going up for adoption. And I thought, that's it. We're never going to see them again. There was no way that I could take them to mom's. There was no way I could get these children. And I was laying there, and then I remembered an email just out of the blue of a friend, he was JP. He messaged me. He says, Doris, I've got this house for rent. Would you and your mom be interested in it? Or it was a trailer. And I said, no, mom's in public housing. She wouldn't be interested in it. The only reason I couldn't get the twins is because I didn't have my own place, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was laying there, and all of a sudden I remembered JP a few days ago writing me this email. So I immediately wrote him back and said, is it still available? Would you be interested in renting it to me? And I explained a little bit about the situation. I said, I will only need it for a short time because then I can get into public housing. See, with public housing, they couldn't give me a house because I could get the twins. I had to have the twins, and then they'd give me a house. So it's kind of catch-22.
It is what it is.
It was, I couldn't fulfill their. So I said, I only need it for a month or so.
2 weeks.
Yeah, just so that I have the twins. Once I have them, then I can get into public housing. Mm-hmm. So anyway, he says, sure, Doris, and he was so kind. He says, Doris, he says, all I'll charge you is for the mortgage payment. I won't even add the insurance or anything. And so that's what I ended up doing. And then now I have a dilemma because Mom did not want me in her. She did not. She wanted to live alone. Mm-hmm. So I was fulfilling her wish, but she, at the same time, she wasn't really capable of living alone.
She wanted you around.
But she didn't really want me around. But she couldn't live alone. That was the point. But now I have these twins now. I've got 2 places to take care of. So what am I going to do? So I wrote a church in Texas, and I said, is there anybody, I was thinking, asking for a young girl, is there anybody down there that could come and help me take care of my mom? And this woman replied, she says, I'm not a young girl. She was my age. She says, but I'm willing to come up. So she came up.
Wow.
She lived with Mom, took care of Mom. Oh, she just...
Was it easier for your mom to live with someone Who, like, with, yeah.
She loved, her name was Pat, and Mom loved her. At first, no. It took Mom a while.
Sure. Well, as it does when a
Yeah,
stranger moves
right.
in.
It's
Yeah.
totally understandable.
Yeah.
That was nothing wrong. And so, yeah, so it, but to be honest with you, I really wanted Mom to come live with us.
Mm-hmm.
I even bought a TV. I got a TV stand I could put in her room and everything. And 'cause I thought the twins could come in my bedroom because Joseph wasn't here yet. And I had it all worked out.
But she wanted to live at her house.
But she didn't. So, but that worked out all right because Pat took, and she was just like a daughter to her. She took care of her. She loved her. And they got along really good. Really good. And so anyway, so and then in 2017, my mom, the nursing home wasn't quite available yet. Mom had to go into nursing home. The doctors finally came to the point and said she is not allowed to live alone.
Yeah.
And they said she has to go in a nursing home. She can't even have somebody living with her because she needs 24-hour attention. So Mom finally admitted that she needed, but the nursing home wasn't quite available. So she went to the Nunavik long-term.
Mm-hmm.
Long-term in Nunavik, and I took her there, and we had a really nice time. Came back, and she had died while I was gone, within just a few days.
It's a big change.
Yeah, that was really hard. That was really hard.
Like both things were true. It's like she probably needed the help to
right.
But then also the big change was devastating.
Yeah. Mom, at that point, she was just so broken, not broken, but very, no fight left in her.
Was she vulnerable?
No, not really. No, she, you know what? She had an amazing mind. She had a sharp mind. She was she was a very good judge of character too. I don't know. There was just a lot of good things about her.
Yeah.
It really, a lot of respect for her. But anyway, so she passed away, and now I've got the twin. And I don't need Pat anymore, really, basically, because I'm just taking care of the twins. But then that's when Joseph decided he needs to come up.
And you had your mom's house.
No.
Oh, she was public housing.
House.
That's right.
Right. Yeah, I got into public housing.
That's right.
Where I am right now.
Yeah.
And so then Joseph came up in 2017 as well. And it was...
And doesn't he still work with the company back in this?
Yeah, so the company he's working for, now he just does it remotely.
Sure.
Yeah. The girls have never had a daddy. And he gets off the plane, and they're 3.5, or almost 4. He gets off the plane, and the girls go running to him.
Never met him.
Never met him before, but he was their daddy. It was like they were running to meet their daddy. And they grabbed onto him.
It's interesting. There's a parallel here with your stepfather.
Oh yeah, right.
Right?
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Never thought about that.
Not biological, but trusting as.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I really, yeah. I adored my stepfather, especially when I was young. And so anyway, we have this picture, and Mona Lee, she can't take her eyes off of him. She's holding, and literally she's looking at him all the time. She's just staring. He's holding her, and she's just staring into his face. And then a few days later, he's sitting on the couch. I walk into the living room, and there the girls are on his lap, and there's Mona Lee. She's got his arms around. She's just, you
Probably feel safe.
Oh yeah. It was so precious, and he's been there. He's just their daddy, and he takes. Oh, they're just so special to him. A really beautiful relationship.
And what inspires you about fostering?
And then, so I was foster, and then I became a foster, and so I would get the children once in a while.
Sure.
And but they're very short term. And then this one little girl came along, and she was long term. Her name was Alyssa, and And so we had her as a foster child for a long time. Now, the way we got Nellie and Mona Lee was through custom adoption.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? We got them through custom adoption. Ashley just has to have the mother. It goes through the courts, name change, everything is legal. Finally, the mom and dad for Alyssa, gave her to us as custom adoption. So we adopted her too. We got her when she was 2 years old, and she's 8 now. And then we're still fostering, and we have her older sister as well. So we have 4.
Do you feel like you've gotten better at parenting over the years?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so many times. Oh, I wish I could have raised our first family like this. You know what the big difference?
Maybe you've done it 3 times.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Oh yeah. Oh my siblings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I never thought about that, but I didn't know what I was doing for the first 2. But there's so many times I thought, oh, if I could do it over again with my first family, it would be so different. I'd be a totally different mom.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool that being able to do it, but again, still not perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
I still,
yeah.
At the end of the day, I could think of all where I lost my patience, where I did this, or you know what I mean?
Totally.
But through it all, God has been my help.
What a remarkable story. It's been 1:20. Time flies. And thank you for coming on and really just sharing intimately about your life. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And you have a really incredible story. An incredible story.
Yeah. Well, I think the only thing that makes it incredible is the fact that God intervened.
It's part of what makes it incredible, but the contrast as well between how you grew up and being left in the woods with little kids, and it never ceases to fascinate me how people make their way in the world. Different people, there's just different ways there's not one way to do life. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that you're doing, good. There's no doubt about that. Obviously no one's perfect, but
no. And if I do any good, it's only because of the grace of God that helps me. I'm serious.
Well,
about
and your
that.
own resolve for committing. So with such fervor, with so little information. That's remarkable. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Doris. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It was wonderful to talk to you.
Good to get to know you too.